Welcome to Kit Katastrophe. My name is Kit, and today we'll be taking a look at Transformers Studio Series Voyager-class Megatron. This figure came out in 2019 as part of Wave 8 of the Voyager assortment, and shares parts with the Voyager-class Megatron from Wave 2. This figure is based on Megatron's appearance in the 2007 film Transformers. Megatron. Oh my. This is a pretty big alternate mode for a Voyager-class figure, if I do say so myself. This is supposed to be Megatron's jet mode from the first film, which had never really been done proper justice before Studio Series finally coughed him up. I wonder why they did the Revenge of the Fallen version first. Well, from many angles, this alternate mode actually does happen to look like some sort of airworthy vessel, but from just as many other angles, fails to look like anything more than Megatron crumpling himself out on the floor pretending to be a transformer like I used to do as a small child. Due to the nature of Megatron's on-screen design, his forearms stick out the front like the two lesser prongs of a trident, yet don't lock in whatsoever, despite the multitude of other locking tabs and slots elsewhere. Luckily, this is about as bad as things get as far as stability is concerned. As far as believability is concerned, though, that's a different story. The rear half of the jet is blatant robot legs with gaps wider than the Grand Canyon, with an ineffectual tail fin jutting out the middle of the chasm. That's not to say the alternate mode is all bad. The nose cone is very sleek and sharp, and if you use the transformation joints, it can be reminiscent of Beast Machine's Jetstorm. The wings are also very impressive in their wingspan and their detailing. I like the scaffolding slung under the wings, it's very alien. And I'm not sure if you've quite noticed by now, but Megatron is covered in a brilliant silver shine. This paintwork is top-notch. Megatron's transformation is rather fun for a Studio Series figure, harkening back somewhat to his The Last Knight Voyager figure, at least in part. Namely, I'm referring to the way in which the entirety of the wing mass is sucked into the calves, filling them out and reducing kibble. The wings fold up in a manner similarly to those on Megatron's Masterpiece figure, albeit they don't end up on his back. The torso and arms also come together in a similar manner to MPM-8, in that the torso splits in half, making room for the arms to swing outwards and the nose cone to fold up inside before being closed up once again. While on the Masterpiece figure, the nose cone splits in half itself and compresses along multiple axes, the Studio Series figure's cockpit segments and twists itself around a central joint, snaking its way through Megatron's torso. All that's left to do is to turn his head around and bask in the glory that is Megatron. With his gleaming metallic finish and faithful Behemic aesthetic, Megatron looks like he jumped right off the silver screen. Despite being a touch more nondescript than any of his successive incarnations in the live-action universe, Megatron's 2007 design calls to me in a manner that I can only chalk up to pure nostalgia for a bygone era of excitement and wonder. It'd be easy for one of the older members of this fandom to write off this incarnation as over-designed garbage, but I was only 7 years old when the first live-action film came out, so this version of Megatron is just as valid as any other to my eyes, and was actually my favorite growing up. Seeing this design finally done some proper justice after over a decade of that trash Voyager figure and an inaccessible leader figure is a breath of fresh air for me. But, as with nearly every figure, it does have its share of problems, but I feel they're minor quibbles at best. Still, I'd like to point them out anyway. The most glaring issue in this mode is the lower legs. The transformation did a valiant job of compressing and cleaning up the wing mass, and while that results in a far cleaner robot mode than would be achieved otherwise, it leaves Megatron with some very chunky calves with awkwardly placed knee joints. And for an even more minor issue, the chest plate is a reused part from the Studio Series Revenge of the Fallen mold, thus making it inaccurate. But honestly, who really would have noticed? No one? I thought so. Strangely enough, this version of Megatron is the second tallest out of the three released so far. I don't remember Dark of the Moon Megatron being that tall, but that's a story for another time. Taking a detour for a second, I just want to take some time to admire that magnificent head sculpt. It's noticeably different from the ROTF DOTM era design, being sharper and more crown-like to my eyes. I think one of the best aspects of Megatron's 2007 design is the head. It's very evil, very threatening, and oh so very Megatron. It's just a shame that from a certain few angles, his open, snarling mouth makes him look more than a bit hapless and helpless. Folding either one of Megatron's hands away gives enough room to slot in his sole accessory, his underutilized flail. Usually, this would have been formed from one of his hands, but both hands are solid pieces, and I'm assuming the engineers at Hasbro wouldn't have been able to fit in the cord or whatever. I'm not too bothered by its inclusion, though I wonder why they chose the flail instead of the fusion cannon he used more than once in the film. Still, I can't complain too much. At least the flail looks good, even if it can't pose. You know, as refreshing as it is to look at a figure that isn't a repaint, I still don't know how the fuck to start these segments anymore. Starting at the head, he has a similar construction to Revenge of the Fallen Studio Series Megatron. I got that backwards. He has a ball joint that lets him look all the way around, though it sometimes does get caught up by the nose cone, which does stick up inside his torso, and it does bang a little against his helmet, which is a crime against humanity. I will hereby execute Megatron via firing squad. The ball joint is also connected to a hinge, which allows him to hunch his neck a little bit or straighten it up, depending on your saucy Megatron flavor. And of course, he can look very far upwards. It's like you put him on the ground and you can till the fields with his chin because it's so pointy and lustrous. Megatron's arms swivel forward and backwards in a 360-degree arc, and they can move outwards in a 90-degree arc, which allows him to do the mean pose. And his biceps swivel, his elbows bend just about 90 degrees, so I'll give him the thumbs up. And at his wrists, his hands can droop and gesticulate, and he can be like, ooh, you can't see me. He has nothing at the waist, which is kind of a crime. If they put his hip joints just a bit lower, they could have cut something just below this hinge. It's unfortunate that they did not, because a waist joint would have done wonders for Megatron. But we have to make do with what we've got. The hips move in a 180-degree arc, forwards and backwards, and they move in theory they could move 90 degrees outwards, but apparently they can't because of these spikes on the outsides of his hips. It's a shame, but he can pull off a major high kick if you can get him to balance. Oh, look at that. He's doing it! His thighs swivel 360 degrees, and they're pretty unimpeded. They don't bang into anything. And here's where things get a little dicey. His knees are so far backwards that they just look very unnatural in any pose. Even really subtle knee bends look pretty weird. And there's just so much mass in these calves that he just looks like he's broken his leg whenever he bends his knee. But it is a very appreciable bend. That is more than 90 degrees, which is very impressive considering just how much stuff is in his legs. And I guess that's in part due to how far backwards this joint is. But when his legs are straight, it looks fine. It's just when they're bent that they look kind of awful. Finally, at the feet, he has a very major siege-like ankle pivot, though it does mean that his legs kind of disengage from the feet when they bend. His toes can point, though this one has a little trouble. You have to kind of force it past this inner platform, but the toes can also bend forward for walking and tiptoeing and stuff. Look, he's a ballerina. Look at him, so graceful and just beautiful and harmonious with nature. He's been practicing all year for his recital. Look at him go. I'm so proud of him. Finally, at the heels, they can kind of go forward like that, but I don't really see how that'll help with posing, besides, acting as a sort of strut for stability, which I guess is what heel spurs are made for in the first place. So I can't really begrudge that. Onto the flail, there is one joint of posability on the flail, which I will demonstrate for you. Right now, I'm stalling for time as I put it on. The head of the flail is on a mushroom swivel, and it can just turn. Is this entertaining yet? Can you tell I'm really happy with this figure? Sure, some of it is undue nostalgia, but pretty much every Transformers fan is guilty of that in one way or another. Despite it, I genuinely think this figure is really good, and if you can stomach the Bayverse aesthetic for Cybertronian vehicles, a must-have for most collections. If you're interested in Studio Series at all, make this one of your purchases. He's also by far the best out of all three Studio Series Megatrons, in both an engineering and paintwork standpoint. As far as I'm concerned, Megatron should be getting the Galactic Award, but that vehicle mode does kinda drag him down a bit. The transformation does have some lazy cop-outs and leaves parts barely secured, sometimes not secured at all. That doesn't drag him down much, though, since I'm happy to give Megatron the rank of astounding. If you liked this video or found it otherwise helpful or informative, then please subscribe for more content like this in the future. Join me in my next review where I go back to Cybertron with a look at Transformers Siege Deluxe Class Autobot Mirage. This has been Katastrophe. Transform and roll out.